100,000 years ago, a human being leaned over a pool of still water, and something looked back that should not exist. Not the sky, not an animal. A face. A face that moved exactly when he moved. He had no name for what he was looking at, no memory to compare it to. Nothing in his mind had ever prepared him for this moment. What do you do when you see something impossible? Because this wasn't just a strange sight. This was the beginning of a fear that would follow humanity for the next 100,000 years. A fear so deep, so buried, that it's still sitting inside your brain right now, waiting for the lights to go out. Let's slow this down. Think of your brain like a giant filing cabinet. Every single thing you've ever seen gets a folder: tree, rock, lion, friend. The moment you see it again, your brain pulls the folder and says, I know what this is. That's how you survive. That's how every human survives. But that ancient man had no folder for this. There had never been a mirror. There had never been glass. There had never been a photograph. The only reflective surface on planet Earth was water, and even that only worked if it was perfectly still. So when he looked down and saw a face staring back, copying every twitch, every blink, every breath, his brain did the only thing it could do. It searched every folder it had, and it found nothing close enough. Which meant only one terrifying conclusion was left. There is another person, living inside the water, copying me. You might think recognizing your own face is just instinct. You look, you see you move on. It feels automatic. It is not. It is one of the most advanced tricks your brain can perform, and it took your entire species tens of thousands of years to even build it. To understand exactly how strange this discovery really was, we need to look at how scientists test this same idea today, on animals. In the 1970s, a researcher named Gordon Gallup wanted to know something simple. Do animals know who they are? So he built an experiment. He took a chimpanzee, put it under anesthesia, and painted a bright red dot on its forehead while it was asleep. No mirror, no way of knowing. Then he woke the chimp up and placed a mirror in front of the cage. Here's the moment that mattered. If the chimp thought the reflection was another chimp, it would react like a stranger was in the room. It would get defensive. It would threaten it. Instead, the chimp looked into the glass and immediately reached up and touched the red dot on its own head. It understood. That thing in the mirror is me. Scientists repeated this test on hundreds of species, and almost every single one of them failed. Put a mirror in front of a dog, and the dog barks at a stranger. Put a mirror in front of a bed of fish, and the fish attacks the glass, trying to kill a rival that isn't there. Out of the millions of species on this planet, only a small handful pass this test. Elephants pass, dolphins pass, magpies, a species of bird pass. That's almost the entire list. For the overwhelming majority of life on Earth, a mirror is not a reflection. It's a stranger. Now here's the part that should really unsettle you. Human babies do not pass this test either. Not right away. Sit a 6-month-old baby in front of a mirror, and they smile. They reach out and pat the glass like they found a new friend to play with. Put a secret smudge of red makeup on a baby's nose. Sit them in front of the mirror, and a 1-year-old will try to wipe the red mark off the glass. Not off their own face, off the mirror. Because in their mind, that's a different baby, and that baby has something on its nose. It is not until a child is somewhere between 18 and 24 months old that something switches. At 2 years old, that same red smudge test produces a completely different reaction. The toddler looks in the mirror, sees the red mark, and reaches up and touches their own nose. In that exact second, the concept of self is born inside a human mind. Now bring your mind back to that pool of water 100,000 years ago. Early humans were not stupid. Their brains were built exactly like yours. But they didn't have thousands of years of shared human knowledge to draw from. They didn't have a parent who once explained what a reflection was. They were the first ones. So when that face in the water finally clicked into place as their own, it was not a warm, cute realization. It was a psychological event that cracked something open in the human mind. Strip away everything you know about physics for a second, and really look at what a reflection is. It's a version of you that makes no sound. It has no body heat. It doesn't exist unless the light and the water and the angle are all perfectly aligned. And if you throw a rock into it, it shatters into pieces, and then seconds later, it puts itself back together. To an ancient mind, that is not science. That is proof of magic. That is proof that there are two of you. The one standing on the dirt and the one trapped inside the water. And that single idea changed the entire trajectory of the human mind. Because once you believe that, a terrifying question follows right behind it. If that thing in the water is me, what happens to it when I walk away? What happens to it when I die? This is where the story stops being a cute piece of science trivia and turns into something much darker. Because early humans did not simply accept the reflection and move on. They grew afraid of it. They started to believe the reflection wasn't just an image, it was a piece of their soul, split off and trapped in the surface, a spirit double. And if something happened to that reflection, it meant your actual soul was in danger. We know this fear was real because we can trace it through the objects our ancestors actually built. About 8,000 years ago, in a region we now call Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey, humans figured out how to carry their reflection with them wherever they went. They found a black volcanic glass called obsidian, and they spent weeks, sometimes months, grinding it down and polishing it by hand until it was smooth enough to hold an image. This was the world's first mirror. But here's what's important: these mirrors were not used for fixing your hair or checking your appearance. They were dark, murky, distorted. Looking into an obsidian mirror wasn't like looking into glass. It was like looking into a hole in the world. The Aztecs took this fear and built an entire god around it. His name was Tezcatlipoca, which translates directly to smoking mirror. He was the god of night, of fate, of hidden knowledge, and legend said he carried a black obsidian mirror that let him watch every human action on Earth. To the Aztecs, a mirror wasn't a tool, it was a weapon. It was an eye that could see you from the other side. This fear did not stay in one place. It spread across the entire globe, across cultures that never once made contact with each other. And somehow they all arrived at the exact same conclusion. You've heard the superstition: break a mirror, and you get 7 years of bad luck. Most people treat that like a silly old wives' tale. It is not silly. It comes from a very specific, very ancient belief. The Romans were the first to create glass mirrors backed with metal. And they believed a mirror didn't just reflect light. It reflected your literal life force, your soul. The Romans also believed that the human body physically renewed itself every 7 years, shedding and rebuilding like a snake sheds its skin. So if you dropped a mirror and it shattered, you weren't just breaking a household object. You were shattering the reflection of your own soul into pieces. And according to the belief, it would take exactly 7 years for your body to grow a new one. For those 7 years you were vulnerable, spiritually exposed, cursed. But it gets darker than bad luck. In cultures separated by entire oceans, from Victorian England, to Jewish traditions of sitting Shiva, to tribes across West Africa, there is one identical rule: the moment someone dies in the house, you run through every room and you cover every single mirror with a thick cloth. You turn them to face the wall. Why would dozens of unrelated cultures all invent the exact same ritual? Because they all believed the same terrifying thing. When a person dies, their soul doesn't leave immediately. It lingers. It wanders the house before finally moving on. And if an uncovered mirror is sitting in that room, the wandering soul might look into it, see its own reflection, and get confused. It might think the mirror is a doorway, and if it steps through, it becomes trapped inside the glass forever. Not at peace, not moved on. A prisoner. An angry, restless presence stuck behind the surface. People did not cover mirrors out of respect for the dead. They covered them out of pure fear. They believed these shiny objects hanging on their walls were soul traps, capable of pulling the living toward the other side, or letting the dead reach out and grab you. Even the old legend that vampires cast no reflection comes from this exact root. No soul, nothing for the glass to catch. Now, you might be sitting there thinking you're too modern, too educated for any of this. You know a mirror is just glass with a thin coat of silver or aluminum on the back. You know it's simply photons of light bouncing off a surface and hitting your retina. Basic physics. Nothing more. But your brain remembers the water. Somewhere underneath all your education, all your science, you are still that same terrified human, leaning over the pool for the very first time. If you don't believe that fear is still inside you, try something tonight. Go into your bathroom, turn off the main light, and leave only a small dim light on, like a candle or a hallway lamp leaking through the door. Stand a few feet back from the mirror. Look directly into your own eyes. Do not blink. Do not look away, just stare. Within a minute or two, something is going to happen that you won't be able to explain away with logic. Your reflection is going to start to change. The edges of your face will start to blur, almost like they're melting. One of your eyes might seem to vanish. Your mouth might twist into something that doesn't look like your smile at all. Your heart rate is going to spike, and you are going to feel a sudden, overwhelming urge to run out of that room. Science has a name for this. It's called the Troxler effect. When your eyes stay fixed on one point in low light for too long, the neurons responsible for your vision get fatigued and start dropping information they think is unimportant. Your brain hates blank spots, so it fills the gaps with guesses, pulling strange, distorted shapes straight out of your subconscious. That's all it technically is. A glitch in your visual system. But your brain does not experience it as a glitch. In that moment, standing in the dark, watching your own face distort in the glass, your oldest survival instincts take over completely. You are not a modern person standing in a tiled bathroom anymore. For that split second, you are a primitive human, crouched over black water, realizing with total horror that the thing staring back might have a mind of its own. For 100,000 years, we have been running from our own faces. We built mirrors so we could finally see ourselves clearly, and in the same breath, we built myths, rituals, and superstitions just to protect ourselves from what we might actually find there. Once you understand that sequence, a mirror stops being a harmless piece of glass hanging on your wall. It becomes the oldest trap in human history, one you were never taught to fear, one that still works exactly the way it did 100,000 years ago, and you walk straight into it, every single day, without even noticing.